Welcome to the Bay Area Coalition Speaker Series. I don't know if this could have been more timely. As Dan pointed out in his newsletter, The Message Box, within minutes of circulating the first images of the horrific Hamas-led terrorist attack on Israel, the right-wing disinformation apparatus sprang into action. Right-wing accounts began spreading false information to score political points against President Biden and the Democrats. So what can we do? How can we push back? You're in the right place tonight to learn. Next slide, please. The Bay Area Coalition comprises 31 grassroots organizations and Democratic Central Committees throughout the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond, with the goal of harnessing the power of Bay Area activists to win elections, to promote a democratic and equitable and just society. Next slide. We are hosting phone banks to Virginia with Sister District and the National Women's Political Caucus. We are calling Ohio to ask people to vote yes on issue number 1 to protect women's health care and reproductive rights. And we are calling residents in the California Central Valley to let them know that their incumbent congressmen have voted against health care, education, climate, and safety. We're also offering voter registration drives. There is one this Saturday in Visalia at the Visalia Pride event. If you can, please try to attend that. There's one on the 19th at UC Merced and one on October 23rd at Los Baños College. And we have another one on, which is a canvassing event on the 28th in Modesto. I hope you can join us for one of these events. We've already registered over 1,000 new voters and are on our way to registering 2,000, but we need your help. We can't do it by ourselves. Myra is posting the links to the phone banks and the voter reg drives in chat. And finally, next slide, but not last, we're offering a training on Tuesday, October 24th on how to connect to voters about abortion. It's something we can all learn to do better, and it's such an important issue. All right, next slide. So now the business is over. I'm pleased to introduce you to Dan Pfeiffer. It's wonderful seeing him, seeing you again, Dan. It's been a while, so it's great to see you here. Dan is the co-host of Pod Save America, the former senior advisor to President Obama, writer of 3 books, one of which was a New York Times bestseller, and the author of The Message Box, a newsletter about politics from someone that actually works in politics. So Dan, welcome. We're really happy to have you. And we can take the slide, Dan. Beautiful. Great.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, please, the floor is yours.
Well, look, I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm happy to be here. This is obviously a very tough and scary time for a lot of people as we are processing the absolutely tragic and horrendous attack from Hamas in Israel. We are worried about friends and family who may have there. We are worried about innocent civilians in Gaza who could be hurt because of what Hamas did. And, and it's been very, it's been very notable just how resonant in what the American response has been, as people around this country have been clearly, it has captured the imagination of the American people in a way in which foreign, what happens abroad often does not. This is taking place in a very, very, very volatile political environment here at home. Perhaps one of the most volatile, I would say the most volatile and unpredictable political environment that I have seen in my 20 plus years in politics. Everyone who thinks about politics, works in politics, writes about politics, podcasts about politics, keeps getting things wrong. And what we keep expecting to happen does not happen. We all believed, put 2016 aside, but look at 2020, everyone believed that all the polling, all the fundamentals on the ground showed that Joe Biden should win by a lot. We have an easy victory. He barely wins. It's an incredibly close election. In 2022, well, then January 6th happens, and everything we know about politics in American society says that Donald Trump should be drummed out of public life. Within a few months, he's back to being the leader of the Republican Party. 2022, all the fundamentals show, based on the economy, President Biden's approval rating, that Democrats should get their butts kicked in that election. Instead, we win, expanding our Senate majority and keeping the losses in the House to a margin that no one thought was humanly possible just a few months earlier. And then Donald Trump gets indicted for 91 felony counts, which even if I think we could have predicted that would not be a fatal blow in a Republican primary for Donald Trump. I think everyone believed that would at least damage him with swing voters in this country. And yet he is actually polling better against Joe Biden right now than he has at any point in his entire political career. At no point was Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden in head-to-head polls from the moment Joe Biden announced for president in 2019. And he has been ahead now, consistently ahead, both in national polls and state polls. And this is happening in an messaging environment, or an information ecosystem that has changed more dramatically in the last few years, the last 2 or 3 years since the 2020 election, than I think at any previous point. The Facebook and Twitter were ways in which that lots of people were learning about politics. Even if you were visiting those platforms for other reasons, you were finding out about politics just osmotically by being around it. Traffic from Facebook and Twitter to news organizations and political content has dropped exponentially in the last 2 years. The cable news viewership dramatically down. Washington Post, which was ascendant during the Trump era, is firing 10% of its staff this week, and traffic is down 18%, revenue is down, subscriptions are down, and that is happening across the board in media. There has never been, in my view, a greater gap between the small percentage of Americans who follow politics obsessively and the rest of the country in terms of what we know and what we pay attention to. And that is creating just a phenomenally unpredictable and volatile. And I'll add one more point to that, which I'm sure we'll talk about this in the Q&A, but the polling shows that distrust in political institutions, Congress, the Supreme Court, the federal government, are at its highest levels in history. We have the highest percentage of Americans, about 1 in 3 Americans who disapprove of both parties right now. We have 8 in 10 Americans who say that the biggest problem with politics is politicians. And when you ask people how they feel about politics, 4% say hopeful, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 70% say angry or exhausted. And so there is a lot happening here. We haven't fully, I don't think anyone has fully processed it or contemplated it. It helps explain sort of some of the unpredictable things we're seeing. But that is, and I will just stipulate, a lot can and will change between now and 13 months from now when people are voting. But that is, or I guess a year from now between now when people are voting for 2024. But this is a very unusual and unpredictable political environment.
So, wow. So talk to us. You mentioned polling. Should we count on those polls? Do they really matter right now, or should we just ignore them and carry on?
It depends on how you want to live your life. There is no head-to-head media polling is totally useless for anything other than moderating our expectations about what's going to happen on election day. We thought Joe Biden would win by 10 points because of the polls in some of these battleground states, and he won by a percentage point in all of them. That made us sad because he didn't win by as much as we thought, but he's still president. So at that point, it doesn't really matter. And polls this far out are not particularly predictive of anything. At around this point in 1983, Reagan and Mondale were tied. At this point in 1995, Dole and Bill Clinton were tied. At this point in 2011, Barack Obama was losing to Romney and losing to a generic Republican in our internal polling. So it doesn't tell us what is going to happen. Where the polling can be useful is it helps us understand where voters' minds are right now, how they're feeling, and then it allows us to craft messages and strategies that can speak to those concerns, those hopes, those fears. And I think some of the statistics I just gave about people's anger and frustration with politics, I think are some real warning signs for Democrats who are the incumbent party, and also the party who has decided that we are going to run on saving democracy. And we're running on preserving a political system that the polling shows many people do not feel addresses them, and is and corrupt and divisive are two other words. And this is, I'm all referring to a Pew poll from September, which is where all these stats in the political system come from. But when they ask people an open-end question, say whatever words you want to describe politics in one word or one term, and overwhelming the numbers were corrupt and divisive.
So what is the message instead of let's protect democracy? What is the message we need?
Well, I think you're not going to know or should know or try to anticipate right now what the message is for a year from now. Right? Like that, the world is going to change 100 ways. The world is dramatically different today than it was last Thursday night because of what happened in Israel.
Yes.
What inflation looks like 6 months from now is going to matter a lot in how people talk about the economy. It is very, very challenging for President Biden to talk up the economy right now because 9 in 10 voters cite cost of living or inflation as a major concern. And that is not just driven by Republicans feeling only 85% of Democrats feel that way. And so it is a very real thing. But and we thought, I think a few months ago that the skies were starting, the clouds were starting to part, and they'd be able to have a more positive both forward and backward looking economic message. But things changed a little bit over the summer, in part because gas prices went up again in a lot of parts of this country. Everyone here in California who does not have an electric car, who has filled up their car recently, knows that prices have over the last few weeks been sort of ungodly high. Inflation has started to come down, but it's still high. Costs are outstripping wage increases for most Americans. But that can change. There were things Barack Obama absolutely could not say about the economy in October of 2011 that he could say in October of 2012 because things got a little bit better. Where I think what we have to do and what we think about as our primary tasks as to win these elections is how do we reconstitute the anti-MAGA majority in this country? The ones that the majority that won Virginia in 2017, the House in the House in 18, the White House and the Senate in 20, and then picked up a Senate seat and held our losses down in houses in 2022. How do we reconstitute that? And part of that begins with getting Biden voters back to supporting Joe Biden. Donald Trump is winning this election right now because he is getting about 5 to 6% higher of his 2020 voters than Joe Biden is getting of his 2020 voters. And that's not because they're going for Trump. That's because they've either decided that they're not going to vote or they are going to vote for a third-party candidate. Now, will that still be true 3 years from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now? Maybe not. And probably not. History shows it probably won't be. Even in polls, like Biden does the best in two-way polls, second best in polls that list all the candidates by name. and then worst in polls that are Biden versus Trump or someone else, because the someone else, it can be in people is a Rorschach test for people to imagine whatever they want. It could be a moderate Republican for independent swing voters. It could be Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom for someone looking for a younger Democrat, or Gretchen Whitmer or Raphael Warnock or something like that. And the last thing is that the Democratic voters are because we do not have a primary, because our candidate doesn't keep getting convicted or getting charged with crimes, we are less engaged than Republicans. That will change on its own. Like, I think a lot of Democrats haven't yet fully comprehended. Everyone here has, all the people we know who engage fully with politics, but for the vast majority of people are going to be quite surprised to find out that Donald Trump is the Republican nominee in a few months, because they're not consuming political news in any way, shape, or form.
So this will be my last question, then we'll take some questions from chat. But when you say that, it sounds like the media hasn't learned a thing about how to deal with Trump. All right, here he is, 91 indictments, and they treat him, they talk about him like they talk about Biden. I mean, it's a false equivalency. What can we do to respond to that?
I think we should probably care about it more as subscribers to those outlets than as political activists trying to win elections. I just cannot emphasize this enough. Swing voters are not, they could not pick Maggie Haberman out of a lineup. They are not reading the New York Times. They are not watching CNN. They are not consuming any of this information at all. There are big moments where some things can break out that people will experience. Biden's State of the Union, where he got into the back and forth with Republicans, that was a moment. If and when the government shuts down because Republicans can't get a speaker in 40 days or whatever it is, that could be a moment. Obviously, the stuff the president has been doing and saying the last few days breaks through, but most of it, people never encounter. And so at what we have to think about, the idea of sort of broadcast media defining the mainstream traditional media, defining the four corners of the political conversation, is completely over. It has been over for a very long time. It was propped up by the fact that social media, particularly Facebook, was putting it in front of people. The way to think about this, I think, is let's go back before the internet for a sec. The way a lot of people knew what was happening in their community or their country was they turned on the TV at 6 o'clock to find out what the weather was and what the score of the ball game was, and or what traffic was going to be like the next day. And so then they learned things through osmosis, or they had the paper thrown at their house in the morning and they picked it up, and they might have read it for the local section to know what's happening in their community and their schools, maybe a teacher strike, or they want to know the box score of the baseball game, or they want the comics, and they would see the news that way. Then the internet came and people stopped engaging with news. People were doing both at that time. They were getting a newspaper, they were watching the news, and they were reading some stuff online. And then technology decided that was no longer an efficient way to get stuff to people. So then Facebook and Twitter primarily Facebook, became the local news and the paper boy. They started putting the news in front of us. You would go there to look at your kids. Look, you want to know what your grandkids are doing and what your friends' kids are doing, or just it's something you habitually do as you wait in line. You just scroll through your phone and you were seeing news that way. But now those people are not delivering news anymore. So people are not seeing news. They just aren't. I'm sure you'll talk to a lot of people who are going to be very worried about Joe Biden's age. And if you ask them when the last time they saw Joe Biden speak, they will not know, because they have no capacity to see it. And we are at a huge disadvantage in that way. So what do we do about that?
Yes.
Largely what we're going to do is there is a long-term and a short-term. The long-term is that the right is suffering much less from this because they have spent billions of dollars in decades building up a vibrant, profitable right-wing media ecosystem built on the backs of cable news, radio, and Facebook that allows them to communicate directly to their voters. Now, that's gotten harder for them as Facebook is disconnected from news, but they do have they still have Fox, and their audience is much older, so they watch TV at a higher, or their median voter is older, and so it really dovetails with the median voter of cable, which is, I think, a Fox News voter is 72, I think is the median age, and 68 for MSNBC, and 67, I think, for CNN or something like that. And the long-term solution is we have to build up an equivalent to that. And we have a huge priority for that, because everything I just said about how people get their news is times 12 for voters 18 to 39. Could not pick Wolf Blitzer out of a lineup. I've never seen Rachel Maddow. Just, that's not how they get their news. And we have no capacity to communicate with them. The medium and short term is that we're going to have to all do this by hook or by crook over the next year. Every one of us has the ability to organize, to communicate with and organize the people in our lives, in our communities. And we're going to have to, and the Biden campaign is working on this. I've talked to the people working on it, is that they're going to give us some tools and technology and some training that's going to help us be messengers. But this idea that we are like, should we shame the president doing a better job? Absolutely. There's no downside in that, but just, we have to remember that unlike in, this has been becoming more true with every election, but now it's 100% true, is that there is no one who hasn't decided who they're voting for who's a New York Times subscriber. And something like 87% of them, mostly, I'm making that number up, but that's pretty close, are people who are already voting for Joe Biden and hate Donald Trump. And so we're like, there is going to be some hard work here to get the message out, but the internet has become small. It is now, it's not Facebook and Twitter. It's our text messaging groups. It's group chats, it's WhatsApp, it's the people we email now. Like, email is once again, building a one-on-one relationship with people. Email has once again become a dominant, an important form of how we communicate with people, because it's the reason why I have a Substack newsletter, is because I can build a direct relationship with tens of thousands of voters or political activists to talk to them directly. It's why sort of the media outlets that are being the most successful now are the ones that are built on the backs of those one-on-one relationships, instead of relying on a social media platform's algorithm to get that message out. But ultimately, this is going to be something that there's a stopgap measure here, which is to turn the people on this call, the millions of Democratic activists who are given $10, sometimes $10 a month to these campaigns, who are text banking, phone banking, going to register voters, is turning them into messengers to communicate with the people in their lives. Because our networks are now no longer constrained to our geography, right? Many of us who live in California's blue area, we may have went to school other places, we may have grown up other places, we have friends who have moved to Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, to pick some states out of a hat, and have the ability to communicate with those people. And we have these, the average person has a social graph of more than 150 people, from their, their Facebook friends, their Instagram followers, the contacts in their phone, and our ability to communicate with them is hugely important. And we know all the research shows that people are more likely to trust a piece of information. They put more trust in information shared with them based on the person who shared it than where the information originally came from. So if it comes from the New York Times from a stranger, or CNN from a stranger, or the Wall Street Journal from a stranger, huge skepticism. If it comes from you or someone else they know, they will put much more trust in it. And so that's where we're all going to have to play a role in 2024.
Thank you. And actually, you learned some things with this is going to be a master class in messaging. Some of our other speakers coming will be able to help. So that was really fascinating, Dan. I'm going to hand it over to Myra right now, who's going to ask you some questions from chat.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for being here. So the group that you're talking to here, a lot of us are phone bankers or potential phone bankers. What would you like to say to that bunch?
Well, first, thank you. Phone banking is hard. It's hard work. It takes time. It can, given how often people answer their phone these days, it can feel very futile at times because you're dialing so many numbers. And what people, I think is important for people to know, is that even when you get a wrong number or a disconnected number, you're actually making a real difference, because you're cleaning up the data. So everyone knows next time that that's not the right number, and it makes us all more efficient. It all depends on who you're calling, right? Are we calling Democrats to remind them to vote? Are we calling persuadable voters? But I guess the thing I'd say is if I could like wave a wand and make one rule of democratic politics, it would be to banish the term GOTV. Because GOTV, we had these groups of people get out the vote. I'm sure everyone knows that term, but that it's GOTV weekend and we're doing GOTV calls. And that means we're telling that our belief is that there's this huge universe of people that if we just tell them to vote, they will vote. They're just waiting for a Democrat to give them logistical information about something they would otherwise not do. And then we have this, what we call the persuasion universe. And these are quote unquote swing voters who maybe they're going to vote for Biden, maybe they're going to vote for a third party candidate. And we're going to try to convince them with the moral persuasion of our arguments and our facts and our policies to get them to vote. And we have to think about everyone as a persuasion target. Latasha Brown, who runs Black Voters Matter, once said to me in 2018 that not voting is a thought out decision. The people who choose not to vote are making a decision to not to vote. They have concluded that politics doesn't work for them. It's not worth their time. And so we have to try to persuade them not to do it. They are not, the idea that there are people just sitting around waiting for someone to put a door hanger on them to get them to vote, I think ties our hands on our ability to think about it, because we're taking our most likely voters, the people that we have modeled out as being for us, and we're giving them the least attention. When it should work the other way, because that's the most highly efficient universe are the people who we believe to be Democrats, but we have to convince them to vote. And I think convince people to vote, we're going to have to do that all across the board. We have all the polling shows. Young people, the core base of the Democratic Party are the people who are actually most of the core base of the Obama era Democratic Party are the voters most skeptical of Joe Biden right now. And it's not that they don't like Joe Biden. It's that they don't think their vote's going to matter. They don't feel connected to him or his accomplishments. And we're going to have to do a lot of work to get those people involved. It's going to involve more of just leaving a message for them on where their precinct is.
Okay, actually, to follow up on that, in the last presidential election, we know that about a third of eligible voters didn't vote. So if you had a focus group from that bunch right now, what would you want to know from them?
Why? Like what it is about politics that doesn't matter to them. Like, why do they feel that it doesn't affect their lives? Like where have they been let down in the process? Which I think is a really important thing to know. And we do have this belief as Democrats sometimes that all these people are Democrats, and that's not actually, that's probably true. The majority of people nationally are probably true, but that's only because the majority of voters nationally are strongly Democrat. But in the battleground states, it's almost certainly not true that the majority of them are Democrats.
Great.
And last question.
Question. Yeah. Sorry, we aren't going to get to all of them today. How do you manage your own sense of hope and your own sanity in these times, given all of this?
That is a great question. And that presumes that I have managed it appropriately, which I'm not positive that that's the case. Look, I think I gave a fairly dark presentation here. And I did that on purpose because I think that is my best belief on how things look right now. And I think there's a lot of Democrats out there telling themselves a story about politics that's not truly accurate. That the idea that the polls were wrong in 2022, so therefore these polls were wrong. That's not true. The polls were actually historically accurate in 2022. Everyone just interpreted them incorrectly. And the polls were wrong in 2020. And I hate to say this, but they were wrong in the wrong direction. And as same with 2016. Or that these special elections that Democrats are just crushing across the country mean that Democrats will definitely win. They're a very positive sign, but we are now the high turnout party because our party coalition has become way more college educated than before. And higher levels of education correlate with higher levels of voter participation. And so it used to be Republicans turned out great in midterms and special elections, and Democrats did better in presidentials because we had this broader working class, younger base. That is flipped. So I tell people this so we can accept the reality of the work we're going to have to do. that Donald Trump can very much win, and he's a coin flip away from the presidency. Like that is how it is going to be. I would love nothing. I always try to remind people that the number of people who have decided the last two presidential elections combined is a crowd smaller than the attendance at a Taylor Swift concert. And that is likely going to be true again. And so we have to do the work. But what gives me hope is, despite all of this darkness, whatever it says about democracy in our country, that someone like Donald Trump could be a coin flip for the presidency, that is an indictment of our political system. That's an indictment of our media. It's an indictment of the Republican Party. But it is a fact. What gives me hope is that this country, despite the structural disadvantages of the electoral college, this country is becoming more progressive, more diverse, and the anti-MAGA majority is actually growing. It is growing. And when it comes together, and in that sense, our task is easier than the Republicans. For all the challenges we have, if every single person in these states voted, Democrats would win them, the battleground states. We just have to. We know it. We've proven it. We proved it in 18. We proved it in 20. We proved it in 2022. There is a strong anti-MAGA majority in those battleground states. We just have to go turn them out. We don't have to get a single person who voted for Trump in 2020 to vote for Joe Biden in 2022 to win, or 2024 to win. We do not. We don't have to get a single person who voted for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania in 2022 to vote for Joe Biden and Bob Casey in 2024. We just have to get the people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and voted for John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro in 2022 to turn out. That's all we have to do. It is easier in conception than execution, but the math is on our side if we do the work. And that is why, given everything else that's happening, I would rather be us than that, because our task is right before us. We know what it is. We know who these people are. We know how to go find them. We just got to figure out what to say to them, and we got to go do the work.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Myra. And thank you, Dan, very much. Have to know what to say to them. That is the tricky part, isn't it?
Well, can I say one more thing on that? Because you did promise a messaging masterclass, and I felt like I spent a little more time talking about message distribution than what we say. In the interim, before, like in this period right now, the ultimate message is about Republican extremism. A right-wing, extreme Republican Party pushing an unpopular agenda to insert right-wing politicians into our personal lives. Right? It is about banning abortion, banning contraception, banning books, telling people what they can say, what they can wear, what they can teach, what books they can read. They are coming for our freedoms. And however anyone feels about Joe Biden right now, where they think he's too old or they wish he'd done this or that, that message is how we begin to rebuild the anti-MAGA majority. We have work to do on our own side. We have to tell more people what Joe Biden has done, to tell people why he'd be better than Trump. But our interim holding best message is this is an anti-MAGA majority, right? It is not a pro-Joe Biden majority. Joe Biden can get that majority. He's the leader of that anti-MAGA coalition. But what has built it is opposition to Republican extremism embodied by Donald Trump. And so that is where that should be the vanguard of our messaging in October of 2023.
Great. That is a wonderful nugget of information you just gave us. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. The information, although some of it was quite frightening, it's really helpful to develop this new understanding of our information environment right now. So I encourage everybody on this call, if you're not getting Dan's newsletter right now, he promised to have a lot more about messaging in his newsletter, and Myra's putting the link in chat for you. So if you are truly interested in learning how to combat disinformation, sign up for the newsletter. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care. Now I want to introduce you to Laura Gottsman and Sylvia Salazar. So Laura is a leader and organizer at Swing Left Peninsula. She has taken a deep dive in how to amplify the positive. And this is what Dan was talking about. Amplify the positive, and this is a mouthful, and muffle the MAGA megaphone, and is creating and distributing short videos and materials to teach other activists and organizers how to talk about and talk with MAGA. Sylvia was born in Colombia and moved to the United States when she was 18. She worked as a computer engineer for almost 12 years and is now obsessed with US politics. Sylvia aspires to help change Latino representation in politics and media. She's the founder of Tono Latino, and she's the voice and face of the X channel En Serio. She is an expert in outreach and messaging to Latinos, and you can follow her at tono.latino on Instagram and TikTok. Laura and Sylvia are going to introduce you right now to how to muffle the MAGA megaphone. Okay, go ahead, take it.
Hi, everyone. So I have to make one correction to what Judith said. I'm not going to talk to you about reaching MAGA. I actually ignore MAGA, and you will too, following our techniques. I have to say, Dan was just an incredible downer. I was not completely expecting that, but what I'm taking out of it is keep doing the work, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So Dan tells us that old media is dying, and even new old media is dying. Like, all that is changing. We are the messengers, and all the Democratic activists here, everyone you know, we're the messengers, and Sylvia and I are working on making it really fast and easy for you to learn how to do it well. And I want to remind everyone that when Donald Trump was being arraigned in New York, I forget when, earlier this year, that was what was being covered by old media. And Sylvia pointed out to me that the way we all found out about the Tennessee Three, who were being in the process of being expelled in Tennessee for creating noise about the legislature not doing anything about gun safety, was it went viral on TikTok. So somebody filmed what was happening in the legislature, young people spread it, the regular media was forced to cover it, and that's how we all learned about the Tennessee Three. So it's a good news, bad news situation in that we all, the barriers to entry to being news spreaders and news makers are completely gone. Anyone with an iPhone now is a potential newsmaker, right? So we can all participate in this ecosystem. And what Sylvia and I are doing is trying to make that easy and fast for you to do. And the first lesson one that we want to share with you about how to muffle the MAGA megaphone is really simple. And it involves you essentially doing nothing, not engaging. So we're going to show you one of our short clips that explains that message.
¿Cómo podemos luchar contra la desinformación de MAGA? Simplemente no hagas nada. Aunque no lo creas, esto es lo que todos los estudios muestran. No comentes, no la compartas y sobre todas las cosas, no la contradigas. Aunque hacer comentarios sarcásticos en las redes sociales te haga sentir bien, cualquier respuesta solo amplifica el mensaje.
And now if you could spotlight Sylvia, please.
Okay, so that might have been a little bit weird for a lot of people because it was in Spanish, but don't worry, there's a video coming in English. If you stop sharing the opposition, what are you supposed to do instead? You amplify the positive on our side. Let me show you what we mean by that.
Here's an exercise. Don't think of an elephant. Let me guess. You're thinking of an elephant. See how that works? Engaging with disinformation, even to reject it, actually spreads it further. So how can you fight MAGA Republicans online? Simple. Like, comment on, and share messages that uplift your values and vision for our future.
So that was a quick intro to the effective and persuasive message training materials that we've been working on. And part of a research proven framework that is not intuitive, like Laura said, but it is very simple. And Laura is going to share some slides now so that you know exactly where you can reach find the two of us. You have links to Swing Left Peninsula's social channels on Facebook, their YouTube channel where these videos are posted, and there's a few more, Instagram and TikTok, as well as an incredible resource that Laura is working on called With Dems Resources. It's a website under construction, and it's going to be a home for resources being created by and for Democratic organizers across the US. And then there's also, Judith can send these slides to you later, but these are the places where you can find me in Tono Latino social channels, as well as the one at the bottom is the En Serio YouTube channel that Judith mentioned earlier. It's Spanish content specifically created by Latinos for Latinos about US politics. Now, as you can see, we're trying to do this not only in multiple languages to reach a bigger audience, we need multiple content formats. And I love that Dan touched on this earlier, because Latinos, we use different platforms and different formats within those platforms versus non-Latinos. So for example, we don't use Twitter that much. That's before this man made it even worse. We use WhatsApp, which is an encrypted text messaging application. And even within WhatsApp, we don't just use it to text from one person to the other. We use a lot of voice notes. I don't know why, but we send each other like voice notes that are like 3 messages long with, I don't know, the day's gossip or whatever. Depending on the survey that you look at, 46 to 53% of Latinos in the US use WhatsApp. And that number, Laura, if you can share that slide, goes up to 70% for Spanish dominant Latinos in the US. So you can see how important this is. This is the first app we check in the morning. It's the last app that we check when we go to bed. And let me tell you a story about something that happened to me recently. I met with someone who's helping with a campaign to unseat one of these MAGA Republican House members that is in a Biden won district. This is a district with a high Latino or like Hispanic population. But this person had never heard of WhatsApp. So I had to explain to them what WhatsApp is and how it is used. And the way to like spread important information to Latinos in WhatsApp is through peer-to-peer communications. So we have a lot of friend groups where we share jokes and memes and videos to stay in contact with each other. It's not with like a business account that people subscribe to that spits links and can track the analytics of each post. Laura, if you can show them a little bit of the memes and the static images that we share a lot. That's, I think, the next slide. The one on the left.
Sorry, it's not. I knew I was going to have, sorry about that. I knew I was going to have technical.
It's okay.
There it goes.
There you go. So these are like the typical messages that we share with each other. The one on the left with the dude with the very, I don't know, obnoxious red outfit. It's actually a GIF. So it actually says, on November 7th, don't forget to vote with a lot of love. And that's very, like, Latinos are the only ones that are going to understand who this guy is. His name is Walter Mercado, and he's like a super guru of the horoscopes. So a campaign interested in reaching the Latino community will first have to connect with Latinos on the ground in that area and then share content with them so that they can amplify. It's kind of like a pyramid of content. And Latinos are particularly targeted with and vulnerable to right-wing disinformation. And part of the problem is the lack of moderation for non-English content in social media platforms and these encrypted text applications like WhatsApp or Telegram. And there are honestly very bad actors trying to persuade Latinos that the Democrats are evil. For example, there are YouTube channels that take Breitbart articles, they translate them to Spanish, they put an AI voice in Spanish, and none of this is fact-checked. And unfortunately, a lot of Latinos believe the lies that are directed at them. So last year, for example, an organization called Naleo found that 76% of Latinos had heard that abortion was illegal nationwide and that a person could get arrested for seeking one. And 63% of Latinos that were surveyed believed that was true. And that's only one example. So it's really important to be intentional and strategic about reaching Latinos. And I know that a lot of people in the chat were asking about this, with true and positive information, which means information in Spanish, yes, but also information that is crafted to how we get our information and share it with each other. Not only translated information on platforms that we don't use, and also do it all the time and not 2 weeks or 2 months before an election when you need them to give you their vote.
So we have one question from chat. Oh, did you want to speak?
Can I just
Yeah, please.
Come back to me for a second, and then we'll take some questions if we have time. Yeah. So one of the reasons Sylvia and I have joined forces is because we both, the Swing Left Peninsula historically has worked in the Central Valley, Arizona, and Nevada, all areas with large Latino populations, and broadening, really being inclusive about bringing Latinos into the Democratic coalition is critical for our electoral success. And as Sylvia was just saying, that's not something that happens 2 weeks or 2 months before the election. Swing Left Peninsula now is very intentional about working year-round with everyone, including in Latino communities. So what we're doing in terms of messaging and teaching and so forth, we're doing together. We're doing it in both languages. We're doing it in using different platforms that reach the different Latino and non-Latino communities, right? So there's a lot to do, and fighting the megaphone with positive messaging is a lot of work. It's a lot easier to spread nastiness and division and negativity. That gets you clicks automatically. Being positive doesn't get as many clicks right away, maybe, but it is what we need to do. And I'm here to tell you, it's the rare job that actually brings you more energy. So if you're an activist who lived through 2021 and 2022 with, Dems doomed, red wave, blah, 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 it was really miserable being an organizer and very difficult to keep going. I'm much happier as an organizer since I started doing this work of finding the positive, focusing on the positive, spreading the positive to other people, training people in what effective messaging is, which we haven't gone into the details here, but we can do it in 5 minutes if you go to one of the channels that Sylvia was pointing out. It's simple, it's just not intuitive, especially if you come from a quantitative background like I do. I've had to really my head over. But I'm really so much happier now that I'm doing that. I'm aware of MAGA, and the negative sentiment machine, but I don't follow it and I don't really worry about it very much. And so Sylvia and I both want to thank you for listening. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Judith, but I just want to mention that the person who is the voice of our videos in English, I believe, is speaking next. So I want to say thank you to Celeste Perry for being our video voice. And I'll turn it back to Judith.
All right. So we'll hold all the questions till the very end. And I am really pleased to introduce you to Celeste Perry, who will introduce you to the Bay Area Coalition Messaging Library. So Celeste is a retired Bay Area radio and television broadcaster, voiceover actor, and as Laura said, her voice was on the little video you saw. And she joined Democracy Action Marin, a grassroots organization, in 2017, and has been up to her eyeballs in activism ever since. Celeste, please show us the BAC messaging library.
I will. Thank you so much, Judith, and thanks to everybody who's here today and all of our previous speakers. And I just want to say that one of the reasons I joined Democracy Action Marin was Susan Bole, who many of you are familiar with, is the leader of that organization, and she would have been here today, but she couldn't. So she has approved my message for today. She would be the presenter, but I'm going to try to step up for Susan. So the question is, we're all phone bankers. That's what we do, and we do canvassing as well. But phone banking is our central activity, and we wonder How do we have the best conversations with voters about their top issues, whether it's gun violence, climate change, abortion? This question led us to develop the BAC messaging library. BAC, of course, is our Bay Area Coalition. And we use the 3V technique. Now, don't worry, I had no idea what a 3V was until about 2 months ago. And then thankfully, we have a resident expert, Natalie Burdick, and she trained us on the 3V formatting style, which was developed by messaging guru Anat Shenker-Osario and her Words That Win strategy. Now, if you're not familiar with Anat's work, I encourage you to Google her and you'll be impressed and blown away. Anyway, I want to move this along. We don't have that much more time, but I want you to stay through this with me, please. A 3V statement contains 3 V's. The first V is our value. We're able to talk about what our values are. The second V is the villain, and we all know who the villain is, don't we now? And the third is our vision, and that's the solutions that we offer. So the 3V is an opportunity for us to tell our story, always beginning with our value, okay? On most of the calls that we make to voters on our phone banks, the scripts that we have are more than adequate. Whether you're an expert phone banker or it's your first time, the script is your guide. But sometimes we go deeper, we go beyond the script about an issue that is animating the person who's on the phone, maybe undecided or apathetic or is, in a swirl of misinformation. So for instance, I might be on the phone talking to a voter from Virginia. And I say Virginia because that's just a way for me to remind you to sign up for one of our phone banks to Virginia. And then that person wants to talk about abortion. I can tell, or she's telling me, or he's telling me. So what I'll do is I'll go to our 3V library that'll be accessible in a link tree that is currently under construction. It'll be done soon. And I'll select the abortion. Oh, that's my voice again. And I'll select the abortion 3V message. And that messaging library is going to be essential for phone bankers. And I hope to see you at one of our phone banks. So right now I'm going to turn things over to my partner in activism and master phone bank coach, Leanne Townsend, who's going to actually walk you through what a 3V message looks like. So Leanne, it's up to you now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. And I did love Dan's call to action that he had for all of us. And I think this is a good segue to this because we do have to connect with the voters and we have to get them motivated. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick and show you what we mean by our 3V messaging. This is an example of, hold on a second. There we go. This is an example of the shared value. So if you get a voter on the phone and they want to talk about, you want to open it up to something that's concerning them. This is a good example. You want to share your shared value with them to commiserate, to make a connection. No matter our race or gender, we all believe in the freedom to determine the medical choices to take care of ourselves and our loved ones. That's our value. The villain, of course, written in red, is yet for years, MAGA Republicans have rigged the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. They enacted hugely unpopular state laws to block women from accessing basic reproductive health care. And now they've gone so far as to criminalize not only patients seeking treatments, but also healthcare providers. And they won't stop until they can take away every American freedom and decide when or how to start or grow a family. And I think it's fine. This kind of goes along with Dan also saying they're coming for our freedoms. It's okay to call it out. We don't want to emphasize it because we want to go ahead and segue into, a vision that we all share, which is over 50 years ago, Americans spoke out for freedom to control their own reproductive health care. We can come together again to elect Democratic lawmakers who will pass legislation to permanently guarantee medical care access to the millions who need it. American families can have healthier outcomes. And this was worked on quite a bit for obviously the abortion issue. And this is something that is really helpful if you get into a conversation with someone who does have a concern but who's on the fence, and there's an open door for you to connect with them. If you get further into a conversation with our voter, we also provide within the link tree bullet points that you can also use. and also they're crafted in the shared value, the villain, and the vision theme as well. And finally, we also will have provided for you things you can text them, hopefully things you can WhatsApp them, maybe things you can, any more information you can provide the voter, we will have it for you. And we'll have lots of links and further points that you can discuss with them. So I'm going to throw it back to Celeste.
Thank you, Leanne. I really appreciate that. And I know it's a lot of information. It's like the 3 V's. We wrote it out for you. And but what we're trying to impress upon everyone is that when you come to one of our phone banks, when you sign up to Canvas with us, we will provide you with deep, deep information. The 3 V style of spreading information, by the way, is not limited to phone bankings. Once you're sort of in the habit of thinking of our values first, who's the villain? MAGA. And what is our vision to combat all of this? You'll start using it in your social media and on WhatsApp. Thank you so much for talking about that. When canvassing, and we also recommend giving the 3 V style of talking about what we need to do in this country at your Thanksgiving gathering coming up in November or any of the holidays. So we hope that you'll join us on a phone bank. And I also just want to say, Judith, I'm so glad you pulled together this meeting. I thought Dan Pfeiffer was fantastic. And I think that he's such a realist. And in fact, I didn't feel down at all. I just said, thank you for saying what we all need to hear. They are coming for our freedoms. And that is something we've discussed at our BAC messaging meetings, is how are we going to take that word freedom and own it and show people that it's such a critical moment, of tyranny. So thanks everybody for being here, and hope to see you at a phone bank. You're muted.
Yep, I am no more. So everyone agreed to stay a little bit later. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will ask away. But it's, I think Dan made us really understand that we are in a totally new media environment and messaging has changed. So someone was asking, I saw earlier in chat, we're not supposed to talk about the negative about MAGA. Can Laura or Sylvia, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sylvia, you want to go or you want me to go? It's not that we're not supposed to talk about the negative that is MAGA. It's that we're not supposed to spread their message. It's very different. So if you start paying attention, I promise you that you will notice that a lot, maybe more than 50% of what passes for discourse, political discourse on social media, is someone resharing something outrageous or insulting or what have you that MAGA has done, a MAGA politician, a MAGA whatever, and making a snarky comment or, can you believe this comment, or what a jerk comment about it, okay? Even people, even organizations that are trying to do the right thing, the one that comes to mind is Midas Touch, who in general I like, but a lot of their content is driven by MAGA's narrative and then them talking about MAGA's narrative. That's what we want to cut out. We're doing their job for them. And that is why the first video in our 5-video training series of how to be an effective persuasive messenger is stop sharing the opposition. It doesn't help to say, this is terrible. Repeat their whole narrative, right? The only part your brain remembers is repeat your whole narrative. So you can be aware of MAGA and what they're doing, and you can make substantive comments about MAGA within the 3V framework that Celeste was just explaining. So where MAGA comes in is in the second V. They're the villain. They're the one that wants to take away our rights. So framing them in a sandwich where we're giving our message and they come in the middle where we say, and here's the villain who wants to take away our rights in order to enrich themselves. That's how you talk about MAGA, within our own narrative, within our own framework, not repeating their framework. That's the difference.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Some people were wondering how they could get hold of the library, and it's a work in progress. It's not available yet. Could you speak about that? Celeste?
Yeah, so the library will be it'll be built into a link tree that as I think I mentioned, but maybe I didn't. It's under construction right now, and the libraries will be available to people who come and phone bank with us. And I don't know if maybe assuming people who are canvassing as well. So if you sign up for a phone bank or canvass with us, then you'll have the option of using the 3Vs, the 3V messaging library. I mean, maybe there are other ways that we can get it out. It seems like people can really use this information, particularly, with Dan talking to us about being the messengers in this critical time. So we'll think about that. We'll think about how to get it out to more people. But sign up for one of our BAC phone banks, and it'll happen. I promise.
If I could jump in on that point, Celeste, there are people like you and me and other Democratic leaders across the country creating resources like this for other Democratic organizers, right? There's a lot going on. And one of my goals for creating the withdemsresources.org website is to hopefully be a home for at least a one-stop shop where people can link to I will link to your link tree of the scripts if you make
Fantastic.
it available so that people can find it, because people are clamoring for these scripts that Celeste is talking about all over the country, because we all want to be able to talk not only on phone banks or canvassing, but with our families at Thanksgiving in ways that are, persuasive. Again, you're not going to convert a hardcore MAGA person to your point of view, but there's this vast middle where if you make a good point, they say, that's a good point. I see what you're saying, right?
Thank you. Yeah, terrific.
So Tony T was wondering if you'll have 3V content that addresses economic issues. He was appalled that Biden embraced the MAGA term Bidenomics.
We will absolutely have, I think right now we're working on, I think we have 10 working subjects for 3V messaging. And I'm assuming it'll expand and we'll keep adding to it throughout. Is that right, Leanne? I'm not, I think that's where we are. Yeah.
Yes, we have 10 that they're almost ready to go. And we've honed that down from a list of many, but the 10 most important ones that have come up with voters already, actually.
Great. Somebody commented that sometimes reframing a MAGA term and owning it for positive is an effective example. Taking Brandon and reframing it as Dark Brandon. What do you guys think about that? Is that in the direction of how you're
Yes, I think it's a good idea to be very conscious of what frames you're using. So to know that Brandon was a MAGA meme and that we've co-opted it, right? So one of our videos is about not using Republican frames for things. So it's whether you co-opt one of theirs or you adopt your own, make sure you're using your own. You're not repeating one of their frames.
All right. And
I just want to say that Corey, who's one of our phone bankers, Corey Siason, coach, she just put a message in chat that there are many economic 3V statements. So yeah, we've got a full collection of those.
Okay. I am not seeing any more questions. I want to thank everybody for your help and for your attendance. And I want to thank our speakers for being here. Make sure you plug into those videos. It's what did you say? 5 videos in 5 minutes, you can watch them and begin to really understand how to use messaging. And then the 3V library will be ready to help you with your messaging as well. So all of those tools are available to you. We will be sending it out. I hope you, in chat, I hope you were able to save those links in chat because we may not be able to send an email to everybody about this just because we have 30 different organizations promoting it, but we will try to send it to the people who signed up that we know. We have the recording and we can send you the links to this really important information. So thank you one and all, and hope to see you again on a phone bank. Take care.
Sylvia, I'm already following you.
I was thinking the same, actually.
Thank you.
Hey, Laura, nice to see you. Thank you for everything. And
You
she's
too,
great.
Celeste,
Yeah.
and you'll be happy to know that I've now learned how to use Instagram and TikTok. So
All
All
right.
right.
my viewership is going way up. Sylvia's tutoring me. So
Good.
yeah,
That's
things are
great.
spreading. Things are getting going.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, Bob, did you have a question or are you waving goodbye?
Here's a question. You need to unmute yourself.
Has a
Yeah.
question.
Bob, can you unmute?
No, let's change.
There he
there.
is.
You
Yeah.
have to unmute me. Okay.
Yeah.
I looked through the chat right when you mentioned it, and I didn't see the link to watch those 5 videos. Is there, could you repost it or say what it
Absolutely.
is?
Yep. Do you get, Laura, do you have it handy?
I'm
I
getting it for
don't
you if she doesn't
exactly
have it.
handy.
Hold on.
So
Give
Bob,
me-
it's available on the Swing Left Peninsula TikTok channel and the Swing Left Peninsula
Here it is.
YouTube channel.
Is it
And
the
now it's in the
YouTube?
chat.
Here
What
you
I
go.
see.
Give me
Oh,
2
yeah,
seconds and I'll put it in the
YouTube
chat.
It's in chat. The YouTube channel's in chat right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
That's the link to the whole playlist, Bob, the one that I just shared.
Okay.
And remember to subscribe to the channel so that you're alerted every time, or like you can see every time that Laura uploads a new video.
And I'm trying to make this easier by we're creating, like I said, one website that'll be sort of a landing page for people to find all this stuff. It's just under construction, but eventually it'll all be in one place and you won't have to remember all these
That'll be
different
great.
places you can go.
That'll be great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. I've got to run, but thank you, everybody. Thanks,
right,
Judith.
thank
It's so great.
you.
Nice to work
Thank
with
you
you all.
very much.
Bye, Celeste.
Good
Bye.
night. Okay.
Great job, Judith. Thank you for convening us all.